Right boys, so in this video we're going to talk about fasting for health and longevity and weight loss. So I thought now would be a good time to talk about this because I'm 65 hours into a fast. That's over 2.5 days. And it's good for me to revisit what I've learned in certain books about fasting and to just make the video while I'm doing it, because when you're doing something like fasting, you want to expose yourself, either speak to other people that are fasting because it helps you get into the mindset, or read books, but you kind of want to brainwash yourself during the fast. If you're talking to people about food while you're trying to fast, that's not going to be a good strategy. So brainwash yourself into fasting while you're fasting is probably a good idea. So that's kind of what I'm doing by making this video. So just a disclaimer, this is not nutrition or health advice. Do your own research and seek medical advice from a physician or a doctor before you make any drastic changes to your diet. I'm just telling you what I've learned in this book. So today the information I'm talking about comes from this book here, which is The Complete Guide to Fasting by Jason Tung, and it's a very good book, and I'm just going to go through the main points that I've learned. There's going to be a lot of me reading just from the page because I just want to get the information across, so we'll see if this style of video is any good. Otherwise I'll just go back to chatting waffle and making it up as I go along. Another book that I would recommend is Dead Man Walking by Stephen Arnio, and this gives a completely different perspective on fasting. So The Complete Guide to Fasting is exactly what it says, it just tells you the science behind it. Dead Man Walking is Stephen Arnio's perspective. He was dying of cancer when he wrote the book, and he was fasting, doing quite extreme prolonged fasts during the process of writing his books just before he died. And I will admit the book's not for the faint-hearted, but it gives a very good perspective, and he kind of has a surprising sense of humour despite his circumstance. So I just find Stephen Arnio's books they give you a good perspective. So that being said, let's get into it. This is a simple guide to fasting for health and weight loss. So the main point, the main beneficial mechanism that fasting induces is called ketosis. If you understand this, everything else should make logical sense. Ketosis is a metabolic state in which the body burns fat for fuel instead of carbohydrates. When the body doesn't have enough carbohydrates to burn for energy, it begins breaking down fat to molecules called ketones, which can be used as alternative energy source. This often occurs during periods of fasting, low carbohydrate diets like the ketogenic diet, or prolonged exercise. Ketosis is characterized by elevated levels of ketones in the blood, and this can be tested using ketone strips which you urinate on. So you urinate on the strip and it will go a certain colour, and then you can compare that to the key, and it says whether you're in ketosis or not. The author recommends getting into ketosis using real whole foods, low carbs, moderate protein and high fat. So that's the first thing you need to understand, is if one of your goals is to lose weight, that is to lose stored body fat, you're going to want to stimulate the body to do that, and you do that through ketosis. If you've got high blood sugar, your body is going to store fat, and if you've got low blood sugar, your body's going to go into ketosis and burn body fat. So your job, if you're trying to lose weight, if you've got excess body fat, you're just trying to tell your body, look, burn that, use that as fuel. The second main point is understanding the role of insulin. Put simply, insulin is a hormone produced by the pancreas that signals the body to take glucose into cells and store glycogen as fat. So high insulin equals high body fat, equals your body's going to store body fat. Low insulin equals your body's going to burn body fat. So that's the second key point. So what raises insulin and what lowers insulin? That's what we need to know, because if we want to burn body fat, we need to lower insulin. If we wanted to store body fat, we want to increase insulin. All foods raise insulin. eating increases insulin, increases fat storage. So eating anything, just the act of eating. And that makes sense because evolutionarily, when food was scarce, because food is artificially abundant now. Food shouldn't really, if we was out in nature, be this abundant. We shouldn't have access to food all the time. So the mechanism is designed to keep you alive when food is scarce. So if food is scarce, every time you eat, your body's going to send a signal that says, oh, we've got food, store some of this, because later we won't have food. And that's insulin that does that. Insulin says, we've got some food, store it away as body fat. Obviously, if we need to use it first, we're going to have to use it, but any excess, store it as body fat, because there's going to be a period when we don't have food. And that's why the storage of body fat happens, and it's insulin that tells it to do that. So eating any food will do that. Carbs and sugar raise insulin the most. Low carbs, so foods that contain fat and protein, release less insulin. And fasting, that's not eating at all, doesn't raise insulin. So you've got a spectrum. On one end, you've got fasting, which doesn't raise insulin at all because the body's got no food to send the signal to store it. And at the other end, you've got high sugar and carbs. So you've got fasting, no food, eating high sugar and carbs, and then in the middle, you've got fat and protein. So this is going to spike insulin the most, and then this is going to spike insulin less. This is a ketogenic diet, and then this isn't going to spike insulin at all because you've got no food. The body's got no food to play with. This explains why fat isn't the enemy and sugar is. So fat has kind of been demonized, and people tend to go for 0% fat options like 0% fat yogurt or low fat milk. And this doesn't make any sense. The real problem is sugar and carbohydrates. Fat is actually my favourite macronutrient. Out of carbs, protein and fats, I think fat is the most beneficial. So you've got people eating low fat options for certain things. Like you're going to have, say you have cereal, right? I did a video recently about real food, and cereal had 4 different types of sugar in it. The ingredients, the first ingredient I think was wheat, and then after that it was sugar, just said in 4 different ways. Molasses is sugar, invert sugar syrup is sugar, sugar is sugar. So you've got 4 different types of sugar, and you're eating that with low fat milk. Now that's going to spike insulin the most, which is going to create hunger, and then which is going to cause you to snack a couple of hours after. Whereas if you had high fat milk and didn't have all the sugar in the cereal, that would have the opposite effect. So sugar is bad, fat is good. So that's just something to get your head around, if you don't sort of know that already. So with the knowledge of ketosis and insulin, you can already make healthier choices, and you don't even need to fast. The author says that one healthy option is to A, eat real whole foods, low in carbs, moderate protein and high in fat, and B, eat 3 meals a day at 8 AM, 12 noon and 6 PM. That's a 14-10 eating window. You're fasting during 14 hours of the day, and you're eating for 10 hours of the day. Do this until you're at your desired body fat percentage, and then reintroduce carbs. So already with the knowledge of ketosis and insulin, we've used what we're eating and when we're eating to improve health and weight loss. So we're not snacking throughout the day spiking insulin, because every time you eat you spike insulin. So we're not snacking, we're using 3 meals a day with a 14-hour fasting window. So already we're fasting, but it seems like we're just eating normally. Breakfast at 8 AM, lunch at 12 o'clock midday, and then dinner at 6 PM. So you might not even notice you're fasting, but you're going to have the benefit, because during that 14-hour fasting window, insulin's dropping and your body is going to go into some form of ketosis. It's not going to be full ketosis, burning just body fat, but your body is going to start burning body fat during that period. So that's basically the basis of it. Now I'll just run through some points that were just interesting points in the book, and then at the end we'll talk about specific fasting protocols. So the author states that growth hormone is suppressed by eating, so growth hormone increases during fasting. Growth hormone is good for all bodily functions, and every time you eat it stops, according to the author in this book. So anytime you're fasting, growth hormone can increase, and the increase was quite significant. So fasting periods are going to increase growth hormone, which are going to help with repair of all your cells. Fasting will not use muscle until all fat stores are depleted, around 4% body fat. This is the point of fat. Now, I don't know how true that is, I'm guessing it's true, I haven't checked the science behind that. But logically it makes sense to me. The purpose of fat on the human body is for times of scarcity in food. So when you don't have food, your body has to resort to fat. Now if you have stored body fat, especially if you've got quite a lot of stored body fat, it doesn't make much sense for your body to take nutrition from healthy cells like bone, muscle, ligaments and things like that when you have stored body fat there, which its sole purpose is to nourish the body in times of scarcity with food. And if you think about it, if you're 10 pounds overweight, there's roughly 3,500 calories in 1 pound of stored body fat. So if you're 10 pounds overweight, that's 35,000 calories available for your body. If you're 20 pounds or 30 pounds or even 100 pounds overweight, that is a lot of stored energy. Your body is probably not going to use muscle before it uses that, because that's what it's there for. So logically that just makes sense to me. Fat is more calorically dense than carbs. 1 gram of fat has 9 calories in it. 1 gram of carbs has 4 calories in it, and 1 gram of protein has 4 calories in it. So fat just seems like a better energy source to the body anyway. If you're consuming fat and it's got 9 calories versus carbs 4 calories, it just makes sense that your body's going to run off of that more efficiently, and that's why I like fat as a macronutrient. The constant snacking of food throughout the day spikes insulin and suppresses autophagy. Autophagy is the cellular process by which cells degrade and recycle damaged or unnecessary components, promoting cellular renewal and health. A 7-day fast once a year will aid in cancer prevention due to increased autophagy. Cancer is simply a disease characterized by the uncontrolled growth and spread of abnormal cells in the body. So the definition of autophagy is essentially curing cancer, because if cancer is just the uncontrolled growth and spread of abnormal cells, and autophagy is the body's process by which cells degrade and recycle damaged or unnecessary components, then that's how you cure cancer, as far as I can tell. Now obviously I haven't just cured cancer, and don't hate me in the comments, because I just think, you know, they say prevention is the best cure. That is how you prevent cancer, I would imagine. Just simply, like, from the definition of cancer and autophagy, that kind of makes sense. For anyone that's worried about cholesterol, eating less cholesterol doesn't lower cholesterol. 80% of cholesterol is made in the liver. I didn't know this was kind of news to me. 80% of the cholesterol is made in the liver. There is an irrational fear of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a fat-like substance found in your blood that is crucial for building cell membranes, producing hormones like estrogen and testosterone, and aiding in the digestion of fats. So, like I spoke about fats earlier, some scientists put out a study a while back and it got everyone freaking out about fat, so everyone was eating 0% fat. I think now people are starting to realise, like when I buy beef mince, I buy it 20% fat, the highest fat content I can. When I buy steaks, I go for fatty steaks, and if I'm going to have dairy or milk, I go highest fat I possibly can, almost like cream. That's how much fat you want. So I think the mindset's shifting again. Now people know fat isn't bad. And if you still are eating 0% fat, that's probably something I would look into and sort of do your own research on. If you do want to lower cholesterol, reduce your... Oh yeah, that was my point. And I think the same is true with cholesterol. I think cholesterol got demonized and everybody kind of started worrying about high cholesterol. And now the information's coming out that cholesterol is actually quite good, especially for testosterone production, which is vital for men and women. If you do want or need to lower your cholesterol, reduce your liver production of it with alternate day fasting. Eat normal today, eat nothing tomorrow, and that's going to lower cholesterol. So, that's how fasting works. It triggers fat burning and cell repair in the form of autophagy due to low insulin and ketosis. Now let's run through some fasting protocols from intermittent fasting, alternate day fasting, to prolonged fasting. So this category is intermittent fasting. So you've got the first eating window we spoke about earlier, which is a 14-10, 14 hours of fasting, 10 hours eating window. One example of that would be breakfast at 8 AM, lunch at midday and dinner at 6 PM. No snacks in between, and fasting until breakfast. So that's a simple 3 meal a day, just normal diet essentially. The next is 16-8, and this is the best recommendation in the book. This is what the author recommends. 16 hours of fasting and an 8-hour eating window. So your first meal might be at 9 AM, lunch at midday, dinner at 5 PM. Then you've got an 18-6. This is personally what I do, and this works best for me, but I went 3 meals a day, I've gone through in this order. And I would recommend, if fasting is something you're implementing and testing for yourself, do them in this order, all the way down to maybe a prolonged 3-day fast. It might not be necessary to go any longer than that, and then pick what works for you, but do it slowly, build up. So 18-6, your first meal might be at 9 AM, then your lunch is at 12 midday, and then your last meal is at 3 PM, and then you're fasting all the way through till 9 AM. You can have these meals at any time, whatever fits in with your lifestyle. Then you've got a 24 protocol, which is 20 hours of fasting, 4 hours of eating. It's probably a good idea to do 2 meals a day on this one, but if you was doing 3 meals a day, it'd look like breakfast at 10 AM, lunch at 12 o'clock midday, dinner at 2 PM, or you could just eat at 10 AM and 2 PM, 2 meals a day. Then you've got a 24-hour zero, so this is an OMAD, or a 1 meal a day. Eat a meal at 12 o'clock midday, and then have your next meal at 12 o'clock midday tomorrow. It's worth mentioning, with all of this, you don't want to overcompensate with calories. So if you're counting calories and you know what your daily caloric intake should be, that's your BMR, then you still want to eat within your BMR during this time. So your 1 meal a day would still be equal to or less than your daily caloric requirement. So that's intermittent fasting. Then you have alternate day fasting, which is you eat normal today, which might be breakfast at 8 AM, lunch at 12 o'clock, dinner at 6 PM. That was the 14-10 system. Then you don't eat anything tomorrow, and then you eat your next meal at 8 AM the following day. So that's alternate day fasting. You eat normal today, don't eat anything tomorrow, eat normal the following day. Now we've got prolonged fasting. So prolonged fasting would be a 2-day fast, which is 48 hours, a 3-day fast, which is 72 hours, a 5-day fast, which is 120 hours, 7 days will be 168 hours, 14 days would be 336 hours, and then after that you're probably not going to measure it in hours, so you go all the way up to a 40-day fast. And I wouldn't recommend doing this. It's probably unnecessary, and it's going to increase cortisol to a degree that you don't need. So I would recommend the most I would recommend anybody do is a 3-day fast, unless you've got serious reasons for doing it. But just to put it into perspective and show that you're not going to die or anything, Angus Barian, I've definitely got his name wrong, but you can just Google it. was a Scottish man who fasted for 392 days, consuming mainly tea, coffee, sparkling water and vitamins. He lost 276 pounds and set the record for the longest fast. And he did that for health reasons. He wanted to lose weight, and he did it under the supervision of medical doctors. So you can do a fast, and that's verified by the Guinness Book of World Records. 392 days with no food, just beverages he was consuming. Because he had a lot of stored body fat, he had 276 pounds of stored body fat that the body's going to use before you get any issues. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend prolonged fasts, and I would check with a doctor or a professional before you do that. The sweet spot, the minimum effective dose, seems to be 3 days, so that's 72 hours. Autophagy seems to kick in the most at the 72-hour mark. So some final bullet points just to mention. Front load meals, if anything. Eat breakfast and skip dinner if you're going to skip a meal. That's because the insulin response is greater, 25 to 50% greater in the evening. So when you eat earlier in the day, you're not spiking insulin as much. Don't snack, just eat meals. Front load or middle load food. So eat your biggest meal between 12 and 3 p.m. Fasting is simply not eating, so it's not that complicated. Just drink water with sea salt. And I've done a video on hydration that will tell you how to hydrate properly, but I just do it, I fast on water and salt. But some people like to include water, herbal teas and coffee, bone broth. You just can't include milk, cream or sugar. So yeah, that was a little bit more sciencey today, but I just thought I'd run through. I've got quite a big collection of health books, and I'm just running through the main points because they take up space and I'm going to give away or get rid of the books. But that was fasting. Hope that helps. Anything I've missed or any information you guys want to throw out, chuck it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day. See you in a bit.